one tip, right? The
Right. Yeah.
secret superpower of good founders is
Mm.
ability to communicate in writing.
Right. Mm.
Okay, what I mean is anybody who can give a good monthly report, very comprehensive, that addresses and then kind of collects all advice and directions in writing, and then
Mm.
makes a call on which one they'll take, which one they will not take, and communicate that back with respect, but say that, hey, I am the one driving the ship. Thanks for your
Yes.
inputs, but this is why this is the decision we are making, right?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to All Things Startups, where we talk about all things startups, business, finance, entrepreneurship, investments, funding, and everything else. Today, our guest on the show is Dr. Rajashree Baskaran. Dr. Rajashree is an experienced technical leader and innovator in the field of sensors and IoT. She's a venture partner at Social Impact Capital and Hall of Fame inductee for the MEMS and Sensor Industry Group. With over 35 patents and 100 referred publications to her name, she's a respected voice in the field, frequently participating as a panelist and keynote speaker at industry events. In addition to her professional achievements, Dr. Rajashree also serves as an advisor to startups in the sensors, IoT, food tech, femtech, and climate tech startups. Welcome, Dr. Rajashree. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I am really looking forward to this conversation with you. Dr. Rajashree, can you tell us about your professional journey from your time as a student at IIT Madras and then going on to the research path, doing PhD, and then your role as an investor and founder? How did these experiences shape your career and lead to where you are today?
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to talk to you and your audience. I am very, very excited about the state of startups in India. I think it's really kind of the golden decade for us in India. So I'm excited to talk to the people making it. So, very briefly, my journey is after my undergraduate degree. Um, I really wanted to dig deeper into more, research, and hence I ended up going to the US. I started out at Cornell University, but mainly because it was one of the universities that gave me a, a scholarship without any particular topic attached to it. So I know that I can take my time to figure out what I wanted to do. I was not in a rush. In my first few weeks and months, I actually sat in many, probably 2 dozen, 25 odd research groups meetings to learn about various topics. And about like my second or third month, I ran into another graduate student a few years ahead of me in a party, actually, who told me about his research areas. And I was very excited, and I invited myself to the research meeting of the professor. I went and introduced myself, and it was in the area of what's called microelectromechanical systems. Today, we all know what they are because every one of our phones has multiple of them, the accelerometer and the gyroscope that are in there. But in 1998, it was not a well-known field. It was just coming up. There were no commercial products. There were a few defense-related products that only few people knew and had access to. And this professor was working on how to make it cheaper, how to make sensors cheaper, smaller, better, using the same technology that's used to build a computer chip. And immediately within the first meeting, I was super excited, and I knew that that will change the way we live tremendously if successful even then. So I took a big leap and said, this is what I'm going to do, my PhD. And even though my background was not exactly preparing for it, I just convinced the professor that I should be given a chance. And he ended up actually moving from Cornell to University of California, Santa Barbara, halfway through my PhD. So I moved with him, and I ended up getting a PhD from UCSB. But really, it was the same project and the same area that I worked in. After that, I When I was still doing my PhD, I got a lot of startup offers because it was a boom time in 2000. So I started in 98. In 2000 was like the peak of startup boom, the dot-com boom, and there were lots of sensor MEMS startups. But as a, first generation Indian in the US immigrant, I was not keen on dropping out of my PhD program. I wanted to finish it. And I didn't take the opportunities I got, actually. Even though I had a little bit of it, always had an interest in entrepreneurship, but I just didn't want to drop my PhD. And by the time I graduated, it was post the bubble burst, right? So there were not much activity in 2003. So in 2001, everything burst. And my PhD I completed in 2003, and there were actually, you could say it's almost like what it is today, a little bit of a recession-like feeling. It was very slow. But I got really lucky that I ended up in a really nice R&D job at Intel.
Right.
Some of the big companies were still always hiring, especially in these, where your training closely matches what they need, then it's an easier alignment. So I started my corporate career at Intel. And then I did lots of different jobs at Intel, including something that's kind of internal entrepreneurship, building wearable devices, building smart glasses, smartwatches. And during the last few years of my Intel experience, I also ended up working a lot with the M&A team and the investment team in investing in startups. And that's kind of how I got into investing, is that as a user of the advanced technologies, I also worked with the investment teams quite a bit. So when I left Intel in 2018, I did two different things. I have an IoT and AI consulting startup or consulting company, as well as I wear the investor hat, where I invest in highly impact-driven companies in early stage.
Right. Very interesting. Even I am a researcher and looking forward to this internship as a career option, which as growing up, we were always told that, that we have to work hard and then take up jobs. And suddenly we see this talk about entrepreneurship, and people see entrepreneurship. Even parents are now encouraging their kids to take up entrepreneurship as vis-a-vis some traditional jobs, career paths. How do you see this shift in attitude towards entrepreneurship, and what are your thoughts on taking up entrepreneurship as a potential career choice for students, maybe at early stages of, especially students from IIT Madras? Here there's a lot of awareness, this proper entrepreneurship cell, we organize talks and everything. So, and at early stages, how do you see that career shift, and what are your views on it as a viable career choice?
Yeah, no, I think the general idea, like one generation before, that you studied hard and then you started in a particular company and stayed with it for maybe decades, right? 20 years, 30 years, maybe sometimes even 40 years, all your career in one place. I think that model is surely gone, right? There are going to be a few options like that still, but the percentage of jobs that are going to be where you go get set in a career in one place is going to be very few, right? Even though if you see my CV, it looks like I was at Intel for 15 years, but I really did 6 different jobs. I joke that my time constant is 3 years in a row, because I like a growth curve to be steep. When I start shallowing out, when I'm not growing as fast, I'm not learning, I jump to another bigger challenge or different challenge, right? So pretty much every 2.5 to 3 years, I had a new role, completely different role within Intel. And so I think that's kind of more or less the shape for future for many of us, maybe not for all of us, not 100% of us, but, and that's not only because of the dynamics of what companies, like, how many people are really needed in these large corporates versus a lot of smaller work, and how fast things are changing. But also, I think because of the rate in which technology change comes, is accelerated so much, right? So many companies just are not even going to be around for those hundreds of years, or 50 plus years that were there before. right? So we got to kind of say that the people who work there will also change with these dynamics. In terms of entrepreneurship versus taking a job, I don't think you should look at either one as a one-way door, right? I
Right.
think we have to look at both of them are two-way doors. It's okay to go in and out of both, right? You don't have to say, oh, I started a startup, it's not going well, I got to try again, I got to keep trying again. No, it's okay. You can say, I need a break. This is really hard. It's something, really new. I tried it for 2 or 3 years. Now I'm going to go take up a job where I can learn a different set of skills. Maybe that'll then be useful, and then come back to try again later, or something like that. So we should not have stigma for, I think we got to be okay with not have fear of failure, right? And when the cost of failure is not very big, then we'll not have fear of failure. So we got to treat it like that, right? We should not be at the same time, startups, if you don't have a lot of supporting ecosystem, it's very hard. So I'm very happy to see in India that there are a lot of support system that's coming up. So I would say for, students graduating, if they're not sure, only thing they have to remember is all of these are two-way doors. Whether it's corporate or startup, you can go in and out anytime.
Wow. And yeah, that's a very fresh perspective, because generally what we hear, people coming for lectures or something, giving talks, they will always kind of uh, put down jobs, especially kind of consulting jobs. And they'll be like, you should take up entrepreneurship, and jobs is, I mean, so it's in and out, and it's not versus entrepreneurship versus a job. It can be going all together simultaneously. So
Yeah,
that's a fresh
some of the
perspective.
some of the most successful startups I know are people who met at work in
Right,
their first
right,
job or second job sometimes, right? So it can be at college, but maybe it is afterwards, or maybe in an MBA school after 2 3 years of work, right? So you never know where you're going to. So startup is also about coming together of very different skilled people,
right,
and you have to give yourself opportunities for that to happen. And for different people it can happen at different times in their life and where they are, right? So you should not be too rigid on, like, when
yeah,
the right type of people and the interest and the skills, the mutually complementary skills, are going to come together. Um,
true. Yes, that's true, ma'am. Thank you so much for that. Then you also work as the technology advisors for on several board of several companies of startups. What are your observations on the technology, the deep tech startups that are coming up, and how do VC firms, especially for early stage investing, what kind of decisions do they make for a deep tech startup? Because which is where generally, you paper ideas are on paper. So how do you identify the potential?
Yeah, I think, some VCs are more transparent than others about
Yes.
talking about it. Just I can only talk about myself, and, VCs. I don't want to talk generally about everybody.
Right.
Um, in social impact capital at seed stage, I only get working on deals where I have either very good domain knowledge, or I can help the founders in a very tangible way for them to go from seed to the next round, because we are early seed stage. And our convictions are really based on opportunity, which is like, is the problem very big? And then just the preparedness and the skill set of the team, right?
Right.
Are the founding team um, equipped to address this big opportunity? And in those are generally what all VCs do, or like, tend to do. But the third thing that we do in social impact is that we have a very simple rule: if you take the social impact away, the whole business model should fall apart. So when we say social impact capital, we are not just saying, oh, we also give back to charity, or we also have 2 women in the team, or we also do. That's not how
Right.
we invest. It's not a little checkbox or a checklist. It's has to be core to the existence of the business. So if you took the impact away, the whole business should fall apart. That's our check. So that's
Right.
how I work. So typically I tend to work in, IoT and AI enabled solutions because that's my area of interest. I also sometimes make an exception if the founders are near me geographically, so I can help them by connection and network, even if the domain is not exact match. Uh, and then I'm always looking for an inclusive team. That is not the fund's goal, but that's my personal goal. Is I like to see the leaders that I want to see in the world and help support that. And then thirdly, if I cannot really, I mean, there are surely no numbers to measure, right, at this stage. So there's no
Yes.
financial projections. So if what I have to see is I have to see the opportunity and I have to see a way in which I can help increase their chances, right?
Right.
So when people get rejected, it's not because their idea is not good or it's not worth pursuing. It's always about a fit. So a VC startup is almost just like matchmaking. It's like dating. It's two-way fit, right? So it's about whether I am able to help them in a way that is very tangible, very meaningful, and then the rest of the other two still has to happen, right? The market has to be big and I have to believe that the team is ready to address that opportunity.
Right. Right. So impact investments, like you talked about, how do you see this impact investments growing? Because generally in the past, some impact is like a side business that businesses look for, and it's more like about profits, and they say it cannot go hand in hand, right? That's been a very general perception. So how do you see this impact investment industry evolving, and what trends are actually coming up in this version? Maybe environment or some social governance, things like that.
Yeah, I think what big corporates do for impact is very different than what we are talking about here. And in general, I will not even talk about social impact capital. Just my personal perspective on this is that there are like multiple schools of thought here. Some people believe that they will do the core business as is and just add some layers, almost like audits and best practices to have ESG, which is actually a good start, right? At least you've got to start measuring. Only then you can change your behavior. But really, at Social Impact and some other climate tech related VCs that I work with, there the thesis is not as much about impact being good as being, the thesis is social impact companies are going to be more successful because they address a real problem, right? So the thesis itself is that they have a higher chance of growing to be a very big, successful company, which will be good return on investment for the investors, right?
Right.
So I think that is a very different way of looking at impact than, purely saying that, and we are a very small seed fund, so we have to say no to a lot of ideas. So we need to have a
Yes.
very good thesis that we strongly believe in, and within that thesis also have a diversified portfolio, right? So that and the thesis usually, if I am very much thinking about climate and sustainability these days. So I believe that any climate related solution company that's addressing a reasonably large market with a very focused solution just is going to be successful and going to grow in the future, right? So it's not about doing good while you're also making money. It's about making money by doing good.
Right. Right. True. True. Yeah, that has to be. I mean, it has to. We have to focus our business in line with the needs of the society as well. Then another thing that we wanted to ask you was, how do founders, say if somebody is working in a climate tech startup, should they target and looking for funding, looking for some mentorship, should they target a fund which is focusing only on climate tech or ESG related stuff, or should they focus, should they approach a generalist fund? Can they approach a generalist fund where they're seeking some kind of funding? What would be more helpful for impact investments, impact related startup?
I think there are no big hard and fast rules. Okay, like you mentioned, seed stage matching is
Yeah.
um, maybe 10% data and 90% gut,
Yes.
right? And when I say gut, that includes whether the world view of the founder and the investor are matching, right? Do they see the world the same way, right?
Yeah.
And it can be a generalist fund. It can even, all solutions intersect more than one area, right? So a
Right.
climate tech will also have, of course, sometimes software, sometimes hardware, sometimes SaaS, sometimes, B2B, B2C. So I would say it's not as much the climate of part of it, it's the go to market. It is who are your customers,
Right.
who is in your supply chain, what are your critical components. If that investor knows those elements, then they will be able to judge whether you are a good fit to execute on that better, right? So what you
Right.
need to do is you need to figure out how can you give information about your fit to run this company, and whether the information you give is something the investor can process because of their background or not,
Right.
right?
True.
So that's more important. So if you're doing a climate tech consumer business, I won't even come near you because I can't help consumer businesses. I'm not a consumer, I'm not a B2C person at all, right? I'm mostly a B2B kind of person. So I would say that I will refer you to some other colleagues who may be good
Mm.
at that, but I won't be able to help, right? So it's more, because I cannot truthfully say that I can judge your competency to build this company because I don't have the competency myself and I don't have any experience in that myself,
Right.
right?
Right.
So that's what you need to try to match, is you need to try to match what aspect of your qualification can the investor understand, appreciate, and align with, right? That
Right.
will help you then find the right fit investor for you. And then
Ah.
most funds also have a thesis, right? The early stage ones won't invest in late stage won't invest in early stage. So you got to know what stage of the company the investors focused on, because a lot of the dynamics of how a fund works is that somebody who writes $5 to $6 million check cannot write a 200 to 500K check,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because their economics won't work out, right? The number of people they have, the kind of due diligence they do, the number of deals they can make in a year, and their network for the next round, all that does not work for a smaller check, right?
Right.
But
Right.
but sometimes the investors can do an angel investment, right? So if there is a really good fit in terms of
Yeah.
skill, you can still approach, but the chances are lower, right? Very low. So you want to understand the stage first, and then you got to understand the background of the investor and see if you can explain your skill set to them.
Right. So a founder has to do a thorough research to approach before approaching investors and
I
people
mean,
they
it's
want to
it's
seek
it's
mentorship
it's
from.
not ideal. There are a lot
Right.
of attempts at making matchmaking platforms, including your advisor's company, right? Which is
Yes.
building a platform. So I think there will always be tools, and you can leverage those tools to do those research more optimally.
Right.
That's, I mean, that would be my advice. And then again, it's still a game of statistics, right? You don't need,
Yeah.
you just need 2 or 3 people to say yes, right?
Mm.
You don't need, so if your hit rate is 2%, that is still pretty good. So
Right. Right. Yes. Okay. Okay, so that's yes, I understand now. Understand better. So then, when you invest or get involved with a startup, one is from mentorship point of view when you are just mentoring them. But when you make an investment, are you also involved actively in tracking their performance, in kind of mentoring them, or you kind of let them, the entrepreneurs take their own journey and explore this path of entrepreneurship.
I mean, there's a lot of different theses, right? Different investors have different perspective on this. If you're a pure financial investor, which is, fairly common, and you have a
Yes.
very large portfolio, then you cannot expect a lot of mentorship or guidance, right?
Right.
Um, but most VCs that I work with, either in their portfolio companies or me directly in social impact capital or a few other projects, I am not a pure play VC. I'm not a financial investor, right? I
Right.
am a technologist, a technical strategist who also does investing. So my style always involves, my thesis is actually built around my ability to help the founding team
Right.
be more successful with me, than without me. But how much involvement varies from deal to deal, right? And their stage and what. So I, in general, no founding team wants to be micromanaged, and nothing comes
Yes.
good out of micromanaging in anywhere, right? But
Right.
surely not in a startup. So I really don't do, other than, how frequently I check in and how I help is really depends on the stage of the company. What is it that they're missing in their executive team, right? If they need my skills, I can come in more often. If they don't
Right.
need, I only do a quarterly check-in, or
Right.
just actually even that could be just an email update, right?
Right.
So it can vary quite a bit depending on the stage. But sometimes one of my partner organization is doing a very important partnership deal making, right? Then they want me to listen in, like, maybe even every other day or every day for like a week or 10 days while they make that decision and have my inputs. Then I will call in if I'm able to, on a regular basis for that
Right.
decision alone. But most of the time, it is not a very high touch, um, engagement. It is a really kind of direction setting, or quite often I don't even give any solution. I just ask some questions. Have you thought of this? Have you thought of that?
Right.
Right? And that's enough. Then it's up to the founding team to interpret how to use that.
Ah, right, right. So should the founders also kind of, before partnering with their investors, should they also have this conversation that we are looking for somebody as just investors in terms of money, but we are also looking as mentors? Because sometimes founders do take up investments and then they don't really like a lot of investors giving them advice, or they're not looking for any unsolicited advice, but the investors do, kind of interfere, I would say. If not interfere, then they want to know quite often what's happening. Why is this? Why are you doing this? Why not? So is this a conversation which both the parties should have before they partner on this, on the startup?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you got to get your expectations clear, and frankly, um, not only is the expectation clear, uh, in early days, when the roadmap is not clear and you're going to change the roadmap quite often, um, most seasoned investors know that that would happen, right? um, but it really depends, like you said, like, you have to understand what is the motivation for the investor to invest. Is it
Right.
purely financial? Are they taking a bet on just the space and not particular entrepreneurs, or are they taking a bet on the people because they think they can influence the direction and the decisions? Or are they betting on a combination, right? Like, are they betting because they can open the doors for some customers, right? You have to understand what is the thesis on the other side, right? And then
Yes.
based on that, you should be able to expect how the interactions will go. It is absolutely, it is pretty standard, to set these expectations quite often. But at the same time, if you have given a significant portion of your company to an investor, you have to expect that they will have an opinion on things, right?
Yes.
uh, and so it's not, it is surely an understanding, right? You are giving away a portion of your company. That means that they also have a say in the company, right? Um, so but in terms of very early stage, seed stage and pre-seed funding and seed funding, it's really important to have that conversation and make sure you're aligned on that.
Yes, yes. So yeah, that's something that I think a lot of founders, uh, because I've heard where people have taken angel investments from some 10, 20 people just because they needed money, and now they're not able to manage all these 10, 20 people because opinions of 20 people or 10 people. So to manage all that, it's tough. Yeah.
Yeah, I can just give one tip, right? The
Right.
secret
Yeah.
secret superpower of good founders is
Mm.
ability to communicate in writing.
Right. Mm.
Okay? What I mean is anybody who can give a good monthly report, very comprehensive, that addresses and then kind of collects all advice and directions in writing, and then
Mhm.
makes a call on which one they'll take, which one they will not take, and communicate that back with respect, but say that, hey, I am the one driving the ship. Thanks for your
Yes.
inputs, but this is why this is the decision we are making, right? And the more you can do it in writing, the less frustrating it will be, because there will be a track of what happened in the past and why you did, what you learned from it, and why you're making these decisions. So one of the very underestimated is that, people like to do, run, but just slow down every month once and really collect all the critical decisions you've made, all the important milestones, and communicate that very succinctly to your angels. They'll probably not bug you as much, right? If they
Ah,
have clear
right.
visibility into why you're doing what you're doing, what is the metric you're going after, why did you change the direction, and that is the level of trust, right? Will To put it in writing, you have to have good trust with the people, and
True.
if you build with that trust, then you have a much better chance of moving ahead without getting distracted with a lot of different competing directional advice.
Yeah, that's, I think, a very important tip, that they should give more in writing and be in touch with their investors as well. So, I mean, yeah, so they are the one who are driving the ship.
Yeah,
Yes.
and if you look around in Medium and Twitter, there are very good templates for monthly updates for seed stage and early stage companies. So you can figure out if.
Then another thing that I wanted to ask you was some of the challenges that you, as a founder as well, that you know uh, come across when probably you would have had some issues with your investors. So how do you sort out those issues, and how do you overcome that challenges, where there's a tiff sometime between your with the investor?
So I just to full disclosure, I don't have venture backed companies. I have fully bootstrapped companies. So I don't have
Right. Right.
venture backed companies. So I don't directly deal with investors per se. My customers
Okay.
are kind of my investors, right? Uh, and that's one way to do it, right? I can, that doesn't mean I won't do it in the future, but right now I don't have any venture backed. I am the CTO of a venture backed company, one
Mhm.
of the companies, but I don't deal with the fundraising or the investor aspect on a day-to-day basis. I'm in the board, but I don't work on a day-to-day basis. There is
Right.
a there is a CFO and a CEO and a few other people who handle investor relations. So I don't handle that per se. In general, though, I would say that this is pretty natural, right?
Right.
Because all investors are optimists. I mean, all founders are optimists, right?
Yes. Yes.
And uh, and you see things in your mind, and you convince someone, so they give you money, and you make up some milestones, right? Obviously, this has not been done before, so you really don't know how much time, effort, skills it's going to take to
Right.
go from A to B. So you're going to guess that, oh, this is going to take this many this much, dollars and this many months to go there, but you may or may not be able to go there in that dollar and month,
Right.
and that's when the tension happens, right? And the most important thing is good investors know that you're only guessing.
Right.
And you also should know that you're only guessing. You should not forget that. You should
Yes.
have the humility that you're doing your best at making an estimate, but you're basically making an estimate. And
Yes.
that's why the written part of it helps a lot, right? Written
Mhm.
part of it puts all those assumptions in writing for you to go back to refer and say, you know what, I had a 6-month plan, I had a 3-month plan, 6-month plan, and 9-month plan. At the end of 5 months, we are nowhere near our 6-month milestone. We are not going to reach it. Now, what do we do? Do we stick to the same plan and we are now almost 3-4 months behind, or do we change the plan? And that's
Hmm.
then a very sane conversation with the investors, like saying, but what have we learned in the meantime? Have we learned something else that can be used to change the direction, right? So it's always important to just make sure you understand and document and communicate what were the
Right.
assumptions that you made, what worked out, what didn't work out, what are your biggest challenges, and how can the extended team help you, rethink the strategy and re-execute, and then there's always a time, right, where we could say we have tried 5 different paths, it's not working. So is it time to shut
Yeah.
down and rethink the whole, or how do we approach this? And we should be always be open to hearing the truth from
Right.
yourself and your team members and your investors on, okay, we set out to do this, did we achieve it? We didn't. Did we achieve anything good that is sellable? Yes, good, go in that direction. But if you didn't achieve anything good, what do? We need to do the right thing and shut down, and even if there is some money left, give it back to the investor and say, I'm going to try again later, right?
Yes.
So having ability to have very truthful conversations about your own ideas. Both you should be optimist, but at the same time have the ability to look back and say, did this go as planned or not? And what
Right.
worked well and what didn't work well, and be able to change direction based on that.
Yes. So communication is the key basically in this
Communication
whole.
is the key, and you got to communicate with yourself too. So you yourself, your co-founders, your team, and the investors, right?
Right.
Because if you cannot do that in a way that's effective, then
Yes.
you cannot find these pivot points, right? You may lose the opportunity to, maybe it was just a small course correction. Yeah, you're 2 months behind, but once you discuss that as a team, maybe you find an idea where you can accelerate, or you find a change in direction that's even more valuable. And then you all
True.
agree to change, and then you
Yes.
execute to that plan, right? So communicating is very important part, and really ability to distill complex ideas to smaller, simpler ideas, um, being able to put measurable goals against your big picture ideas, and then being able to evaluate whether you reach the goal or not.
Yes.
These are all very critical skills of the founding team. And if you don't have it yourself, then the CEO has to make sure there's somebody in the founding team that has that skill.
Okay. Okay. Yes. And do you also look for these kind of skills while you are evaluating the founder?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. The founding team, I mean, I never invest without talking to the whole team, because I want to know
Okay.
whether their understanding of the problem are all the same, first of all. Because
Right.
I know otherwise they're never going to solve the problem if they don't even know what is the problem they're solving and they can agree on it. Right?
Ah. Right. Yes.
Right. So I surely, it's very important to understand the relationship, the working culture, and the communication skills um, of the core team. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Generally, the people focus only on the founder, that we're looking for these qualities in a founder. Yes.
Well, it depends on the stage, right? If you already
Yes.
have
Yes.
a few critical people, I really do want to, see.
Yeah. Right. Right. Okay. Then you just mentioned that you run a bootstrap startup. So now there's a lot of talk about bootstrapping versus raising funds. So when do you think is the right time for a startup to raise a fund, and what can be the reasons? Is it like for paying salaries or for scaling? What should be the right time for a startup to raise funds? Look for funds at early stage. Should they look for grants? Should they look for giving up some equity?
I think it's not a question of when is a good time. You have to just put yourself in the investor's shoes, right? Is this idea going to bring a return on investment for somebody else's money?
Right.
Right? That's really all that matters, right? So not all ideas are venture backable, right? And not all ideas are external funding related, right? Some businesses are good family businesses. Some businesses are good, business for which you can take a loan from a bank and run it, right? And pay the interest and still make profit and still make good salary for everybody and run, right? So there are lots of different types
Yes.
of businesses, right? And venture is only one class of funding to run any business.
Yes.
And it's actually a very
Yes.
minority class in the grand scheme of things, in the grand scheme of all businesses. Venture is a very small class, or a very one type of, and typically venture investors get very high returns on their money. So they take
Yes.
high risk, high return, right?
Yes.
But venture funds are portfolio. So let's say I have, like, just for simple math, I have $1 million and I want to invest in 10 companies as a venture investor. But I want to make my $1 million to at least 5 million. That's my goal, if not 10, right?
Right.
And so I want to invest my $1 million in 10 startups, but I know that early stage startups, many of them will fail. Right. So the idea is to take an idea and say, within that idea, I'm going to invest in 10 or even 20, right? Maybe small. And one of them needs to grow 100x or 50x. So I can get my 10x on the whole fund back, right? So maybe only 1 or 2 out of the 20 will grow big and many will die. That is the assumption of it. This is called the long tail model, right? Just a few winners and a lot of. This is not necessarily good for most companies, because most companies don't go from 1x to 100x in 3 to 5 years.
True.
Right? So only companies that have the potential to grow exponentially are typically venture fundable, right? And the corollary to this long tail model is that, by definition, if you're not growing fast enough, investors don't like your business, right? Because if you just grow slowly, they won't make money back. Right? So that's why you got to align with the investors model, right? So the right time for you to raise is if you have a thesis and you have some proof points that you're going to grow really fast. Right? If you cannot grow really fast, it is still could be very good business, but maybe there are other forms of financing that is right for those businesses.
True.
Right? So it's very simple. So venture scalable companies that's why you start with the market size. So think about it. If you want to go very fast, you need to be in a place that's very big, right? If there are not enough customers, you cannot grow very fast, right? So you need to have a market that's very big. You need to have a disruptive idea. It could be technology, it could be supply chain, it could be business model, but you need to have something disruptive that will let you grow along this very steep curve, right?
Yeah.
And when you go to investor is when you can convince them of this story.
True.
Right? It doesn't matter where you are, how many people you have and all that. Like, they don't care whether you pay salary or you do. They do, but what I'm trying to say, that's not the problem. The problem statement for them is, I give you, $100,000 today. Will your company become basically a 10 million or $100 million company in 5 to 10 years? Only then my small percentage will come back to me, right? Only then I can return my fund. So you have to understand that venture class is a very unique class. And in full honesty, I don't even think most venture capitalists tell, this is kind of biggest misunderstanding, is that most companies, most ideas are not ready for venture capital for a long time.
Yes.
Because of this, right? Because you need to really understand, are you along do you have the possibility of growing along a very steep curve? And sometimes it's very shallow till you get steep, right? So you need to believe in building that moat, building that capability, and something truly disruptive.
Yes. Yeah. So that clarity for the founder is very important. Otherwise, they can just get into this rut of just raising funds and then instead of focusing on the business.
Yeah. But, the truth is, if you don't see that potential, you should not be able to raise money that easily, right? So if your investors don't believe that that is possible, right? And there are a lot of other strategies, right? You can raise money. If you're going to have physical assets, you can raise money on a loan against those assets, right? If you really have a good service business where you have a decent margin, you can get bank loans and you can get other guarantees, other programs. And you can run a very, very successful business and even grow it quite big. But the growth scale may be more linear, right? You have to put the same amount of money to grow, and then you'll get back more. But it's not going to be put 1x and get 10x, right? So maybe you put 5 and you get 6 or 7 or 10. That's linear transformation, and those can be very good businesses to build and run. And there is nothing wrong in running those businesses. You can employ a lot of people. You can, have solve a very important problem, right? And you can run a very good business doing that. And we should not you should not, there is really a lot of value. Most businesses in the world are businesses like that.
Right. True. Yes. Okay. So the next, I wanted to also understand how has been your journey as a founder. You're a founder of Manifold Labs, Superbloom Studios, co-founder Superbloom Studios. I want to know what kind of problems that you're solving at these organizations, and how has been your journey till now as a founder.
Absolutely. So I'll focus on Superbloom Studios because I'm super excited about it. Superbloom Studios is a really very unique concept. We are both a people, process, and data consulting company, and I founded it with two of my IIT Madras classmates, two other alumni, two other women. And we are friends of, 25, 30 years now. I lost count, whatever number that is. And it really came about, we three have very different skills. Even though we were in IIT Madras together, we kind of diverged quite extensively. I'm on the technical track and investment track. My partner, Aruna Seshadri, after her engineering master's, went on to become a management consultant in a boutique management consulting house. And then went to Harvard to get an MBA, and then came to India to set up their India office in Pune, and then later in Bangalore. So she has very different, she's more of a management person now. And our third partner, Vani Matan, ended up marrying a German exchange student who came to IITM when I was in Germany, actually, funny enough. And then she lives and works in Germany now. And she has lived in India with her family as an expat for a few years in between. And she's a cross-cultural coach. So she has always been the one who told me that she wants to be the next Oprah. And so now she's our Oprah. She's our kind of marketing and storyteller, and also a cross-cultural coach. So the three of us bring very different perspective to any problem. And together we help our clients solve really hard to solve both data science and inclusivity problems, DEI problems, but more importantly, even avoid them before they become problems by working, on more inclusive ways of approaching both people development and how to build products that are more inclusive.
Right, interesting. So IIT Madras, rocking as always.
The IIT alumni gang, yes. And now in three different continents. So we are also kind of role models for how to work across, big time zones, cultures, continental borders. And because we have this trust of, many, many years, we make the asynchronous and semi-synchronous really work well for us. And it's been some of the best, work I have to say in my career in the last year and a half. And we have some really amazing new initiatives that we're going to announce in the next few months. So stay tuned. We do write a newsletter on LinkedIn. So if you and your people can subscribe, that'll be great. I'll send you an email with the link. It's Superbloom Studios in LinkedIn. And we write a monthly newsletter. We'd love to have your audience read to see what we do and what's going on.
Sure, really looking forward to it and to know more of Superbloom Studios. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for, since you have to go, I would love to have more, a longer conversation with you. But thank you so much for sharing all that with us.
We can try and schedule one another time.
Sure. No problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, Rajashree.